back, programmers, to another exciting NDS programming tutorial. Last time we went on and did multi-file projects. I showed you guys how to put a bunch of files together into one single project. And if you look at what I've got pulled up here, this is a multi-file project. And as you can see, this looks like the beginning of a text game. But we're not making a text game. Well, maybe. We're not really making a game here. I'm just showing you how to do this stuff. But let's go through what we've got already here. We've got our console default mode initializer. Have like our keyboard thing for scanf initializers right here. How many of you tested that out, by the way? Let me know in the comments. Clearing the screen, set brightness. I just leave it there, not exactly sure what it does. And then of course our printing. Very basic, but I want to remind you of something that you may or may not have noticed. The console default mode initializer initializes the text to go on the bottom screen. Here's the thing. We still have another screen we can use. So, instead of trying to mess with working just with the bottom screen, why don't we go and see what we can put on the top screen too? And that's what we're covering today. Backgrounds. So yeah. So, where do we begin? Well, hopefully there's already a tutorial for the graphic designers, or there will be one eventually, a graphic design tutorial on backgrounds. So if you're the graphic designer, then you should go over and check to see if that's there yet. Otherwise, you should go see if your graphic designer has anything made for you yet. That's what we're gonna go do. So we're gonna go into our trusty dusty Dropbox, and I don't think there's anything in GCO resources yet, so we're gonna go in here, we're gonna go into backgrounds, and you'll notice our graphic designer has made a bunch of crazy little pictures for us. And is that it? Okay, that might be a little glitchy there. Anyways, what should we pick? Let's pick this little happy little guy right here. So we're just going to copy that. And now, we're going to go back to our DevKit Pro folder, go into Nightfox library, go into Tools. Now, this little My Tools thing, we're going to go into Tools. We're going to go into something called Grid. And what we will see is there's this little folder called BMP. That's where we want to put all our graphics that we want to convert. So we need to convert our graphics. And I did not mean to do that. And to rename this thing. And we're just going to call this, we're going to call it Cookie D. Because why not? Alright. Gonna go right back out, and there's this trusty little convert backgrounds batch file all conveniently laid out for us, and we just have to double click it and it does all the converting for us. Awesome. You can find it in backgrounds right here. Here's our cookie D. We can just copy all these files out, and we're gonna go back into our project and paste them in Nitro files, because that's what we do. Now, Nitro files, we could technically make a folder called backgrounds and paste these all in there, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to keep the name short and not do that. So anyways, that's converting backgrounds. Really, really easy. Oh, there's something I wanted to show you though. Yeah, nope, wrong one. If we go back to this folder, notice if you go back to Tools, you'll see something called Splash Screens. And these right here, you'd have to edit these to include a little extra space. Notice the dimensions are 256 by 192. You'd have to add about 64 bytes of just blank space on the bottom to make these work. But you can use these for splash screens backgrounds because you're going to be using these in the project, so why not? And they're actually pretty decent looking. They did a good job designing these. So yeah, please feel free to use those in your projects. However, for the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to use we're going to use cookie D and get right to it. So, Nightfox, because we're working with graphics now. If you haven't figured it out yet, we use this script tool that was in the Nightfox folder. We are going to be using Nightfox library. Welcome to Nightfox. There's this documentation, this English manual right here, which has all the documentation as for what we need. It already has basically how to set it up. And if you'll see, first function is an error function the library uses. We can ignore that. The second function is the key right here. This tells us that this basically tells the DS our special file system. Remember we have a file system in our executable? Well, here it is. So we gotta tell it that that exists. I don't think I'm gonna go through the manual anymore showing you guys it. You guys can find it yourself. So this is called nf set root folder. And inside we have this special little code called NitroFS. Now this means that it's going to use an internal file system of the executable rather than just like your normal FAT file system. Because you can use FAT as well, like outside of the game's executable, you can have stuff stored and whatever and load stuff from there. You will need that for doing game saves and game loads, but we're not going to really work with that right now. We have NitroFS, that's all we really need. So, that's covered. Next thing we need to do, we need to initialize well, first of all, we need to initialize our 2D hardware. We need to tell it that we're working in a 2D setup. So we are going to go into nf set 2D. I think it looks like that. And it's going to ask for our mode. So we're going to do 0. Because there's different 2D hardware modes, numbered 0 through 6, and then there's 3D mode that can go on top of one of the layers. But we're going to use mode 0 just because that's the easiest. And it basically means that there's 4 layers of backgrounds that you can put on a screen, and in our case we're going to have all of them be tile backgrounds because that's what we made, is we made a tile background. So next function, next of our initializers, is going to be init background, or buffers. I don't think there's any parameters for this one, which is nice. And basically this is initializing the buffers, the memory in RAM that is going to be used to manipulate and store all our backgrounds. So we kind of need that. Now we're going to go to nf init tiled background system. And this one does have a parameter. It asks for which screen we want to set up our tile background system on. 0 is top screen, 1 is bottom screen. We want top screen. So that's it. I believe this is all our initializers. Just going to check. Yep. Set 2D. Oh, we need to set the screen for the set 2D. I knew there's something missing. Something didn't quite look right. And that's also going to be screen 0. There. That looks right. So, 4 initializer functions for Nightfox. Except this one is also going to come in handy when we do sound. That'll be for probably next tutorial. So let's get started. Load background. So what you have to remember is the NDS has 2 spots of memory. One is RAM, which is 4 megabytes, and the other is VRAM, or video RAM, which is less than 1 megabyte. It's just a little bit over half a megabyte. And this VRAM is where the GPU goes in and actually reads like the graphics information and actually puts it on the screen. This is where the GPU goes and reads stuff. So we have to make sure that we put our backgrounds, we have to load them into RAM and then put them onto VRAM. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to call Nightfox load tile background. And there's 3 parameters for this. The first one is our file path. And what do we call this guy? I think we call him cookie D. Remember, our root folder was the Nitro file system, and this thing was just on the root folder. So we don't have to do anything else. We don't need to put extensions or anything. That's automatically handled for us with Nightfox. So this is all we need. Our second name is going to be our handler name. This is kind of a strange setup, but we need to give this background a name that we're going to use whenever we want to manipulate the background. And we're just going to call that, why don't we just call it the same thing? By the way, the D stands for dragon. Our next set of parameters are going to be our dimensions. They have to be multiples of 256. Ours is just 256 by 256. And that's it. So this background is now loaded into RAM. Now we want to send it to VRAM and put it on the screen. And we have one function to do that for us. Ooh, I may need to sneeze here. Sorry about that. Alright. Create tiled background. Forget the order of the parameters. Let me check. Yep, need tile background buffers, that's void. Background system is screen. Void tile background. Screen layer name, that's what it is. So, I had that backwards. So our screen is going to be 0. Our layers, 0 is the first layer you see, 1 is the second layer, 2 is the third layer, 3 is the fourth layer. In the graphic design tutorial, they'll go over like transparency stuff, so you can have like awesome layering and creating cool effects with that. But we're going to put this one just on layer 0 because we can. And then our name is cookie D. And I'm already getting errors that I'm running out of space. Why does it do that? It should not be doing that. Sorry, recording issues. Anyways, we created our tile background, and it should be on the screen. And a little note is if you create another tile background on the same layer, on the same screen, it automatically deletes the one that's there for you. So you don't have to always use delete tile background. There are functions like that though. I can show you them right here. If you want to unload a tile background from RAM, here's your function right here. Tile backgrounds use, well, there are multiples of 256. You can have the default is set up that you can have up to 32 backgrounds loaded into RAM. Here's the delete tile background. You just specify the screen and layer. It automatically knows what it is. And then there's a bunch of other random stuff. And I think if we go back up to 2D, yep, that's where it is. There's 2 extra fancy little functions. NF show background, which shows like a hidden background, and NF hide background, which allows you to just make a background become transparent for a while. So that's kind of fancy, kind of cool. And you guys can use those in your games, but I think for this, we're pretty much done. So we're going to save that. Go out into here. Compile it. If they didn't screw up something. Yep, I already screwed up something. No spaces. No spaces. And once we close that out. What did I screw up this time? On key pressed was not declared in the scope. I must have screwed up the header file. Oh, I know the issue. It's in main, actually. I forgot to include See, even people like me make errors. H. That should solve our issue. Two errors in one series, jeez. Anyways, there's our NDS file. There's our little cookie dragon and our hello world. So, that was backgrounds for you guys. Sorry with all the errors, and it seems like I can never get these tutorial videos right. That's okay. Hopefully you guys are learning, and hopefully I can get this recording thing to stop blinking at me telling me that it's running out of space, because I keep deleting the videos between recordings and it still thinks they exist or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, until our next video where I go over sound effects, see you guys later.